Welcome back to another episode of Be Wyoming. I'm your host, Aaron Gray, and on today's episode, I traveled out to the E-Bar-U Ranch to interview Dave Kane. Dave is a fourth-generation cattle rancher, is the current first vice president of the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. In June of this year, he will become the acting president of the association. He's also a father, grandfather, husband, and more. In his interview, we discuss the history and issues of the Wyoming Stock Growers Association and the importance of livestock producers and agriculture in Wyoming. Listen for Dave's nuggets on leaving a legacy, whether that is family legacy, business legacy, or both. You can hear his passion and what he does and why he participates in the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. Dave is an embodiment of what it means to be Wyoming. He loves what he does. He works with livestock and agriculture and is continuing on his family legacy as well as passing it on to his son, Nate. So here's our interview with Dave Kane. And welcome in, listeners. We call them the Wyoming knuckleheads, Dave.
I'll fit right in.
Yeah. Well, it's bad if we have to explain the joke, but since Governor Gordon called us knuckleheads during COVID, so we're all knuckleheads. But anyways, it's probably a bad joke that we have to explain it. But today I'm sitting down with Dave Kane. Currently is still the vice president to the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, but in June you will be the president of the Stock Growers Association. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. Thank you for letting us come by. We're here at your the EU Ranch.
E-Bar-U.
E-Bar-U Ranch. I was a little nervous. I was like, because we got snow, and I was like, I don't know how bad it's going to be, but it's actually turning out to be a wonderful day out here. Yeah. So thanks for letting us stop by and sit down and learn a little bit more about the Stock Growers Association.
Well, glad you came.
So we were just talking off air about kind of the inception of the association, but it started in 1872, and its main purpose what came about was preserving kind of the cattle industry and property rights. Is that kind of about, am I summing that up well?
Yeah. It was the issues of the day that affected the livestock industry at that time. Okay. And that was to preserve and protect it. Yep.
Awesome.
Cattle rustling was a big deal then, so that was a big issue that they handled.
Sure. And would you say, I mean, times changed a lot, but would you still say that's kind of the overarching purpose of the Stock Growers Association now?
Yes.
Okay.
It is. Yep.
Awesome.
Some of the issues have changed. Some of them haven't changed a bit.
Right.
But yep, they still tackle the issues.
Yeah. And your little cheat sheet, I saw that, branding. I mean, that's still, which you're talking about cattle wrestling, and yep. that's still kind of an issue. That's one of your guys' focus in that pamphlet there. But so tell me a little bit about your history with the association. I kind of wanted to dive into, how long have you been a member? And then, you have to serve kind of a little bit as vice president, sounds like, until you can, maybe serve as president. So talk a little bit about maybe why you joined the Stock Growers Association.
Well, in my case, the Stock Growers has been something that my family's been involved in since before I was born. Okay. My grandfather was very active in it, and then my father was actually a past president of the Wyoming Stock Growers in the 80s. And when I came back to the ranch, and I saw the value in the association, and so I started attending the meetings, and then I was asked to serve on some committees, and which I did, and then I was asked to be a regional vice president, which I did. And then a couple of years ago, they asked if I would be willing to step into the leadership role more. And
wonderful.
Became first vice president, which is 2 years, and then you go on to be president.
Gotcha. Talk a little bit about what's it involved to be kind of a regional, and then like the committees, so what's that all entail?
Okay, so the committee work of the association is there's a whole bunch of different committees that address specific topics. Ag tax and finance would be one. Brand inspection is one. Health is one. Livestock health.
Yep.
Federal lands is one. Private lands, there's several. And so then as a committee chair or vice chair, you run those committee meetings and address those issues that pertain to your committee at each summer and winter convention.
Okay.
And out of those committees is how you develop your policy, which then gives direction to the officers on how they address those issues.
Gotcha.
So you don't just have officers going out and giving their opinion. They are actually deciding things based on the policy that is voted on by the membership.
Yep.
And so that's what the committee chairs do and vice chairs.
Gotcha.
And then as the regional vice presidents, the regional reps, there's about, depending on the population of ag in each counties.
Okay.
But there's 3 to 5 counties represent a region. Region 1 is where we are here, and that would be Sheridan, Campbell, Weston, Crook, and I'm missing one.
Okay. Northeastern.
Pretty much northeastern Wyoming.
Okay.
Minus Johnson County now. It used to be, but because of the makeup of membership, we put Johnson County to a different region.
Gotcha.
Because of numbers.
Okay.
So, but then as a regional vice rep, you are actually part of the leadership team, and you handle issues pertaining to your region.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's kind of the go-between.
Yeah, nice. So yeah, it's like you said, the officers don't just get to go do their own decisions. This has been, summer and winter conventions and meetings, and then that's kind of how the policy gets, developed. I kind of want to actually go back. I kind of skipped this whole part, but where are you originally from? And then you talked about your family. I think you said your grandfather was a past president. Your father was a past president. So are you I meant to ask you this like right off the bat, so I apologize. Are you a 3rd generation cattleman or 4th generation? So you're 4th generation, and then so Nate's a 5th generation.
That's correct.
That's amazing.
My great-grandfather homesteaded here in Sheridan County in 1882.
Wow.
He, out at the foot of the mountains, Big Goose Canyon.
Okay.
Is where the original Kane homestead was.
Wow. That's awesome. Okay, so Nate's a 5th generation, you're a 4th generation.
Yep.
That's amazing. I should have started off with that first, but anyways. So talk a little bit about, your family's obviously been heavily involved. What are some values that you've seen? Obviously you're in the leadership now, but as a member, what is something that you can remember growing up that you were like, yeah, there's value in the association, or just something that you remember that you're like, I want to serve or lead in the association?
I think the value that I first really saw was probably my father going to these meetings, and when he got into leadership, he was actually attending meetings statewide and nationally. He was going to Washington, D.C. He was meeting with our congressional delegation, and then of course I was privy to the issues that were
being discussed at that time.
Right. And they were important to the industry. And so you realize that, well, one of my favorite sayings is if you're not at the table, then you're probably on the menu. And I think that is so true in agriculture. If you don't, if they're going to start bashing agriculture, or they're going to jam stuff down your throat, if you don't stand up and explain why that's not a good idea, or just let it happen, whose fault is that? Right. So, and I think the stock growers is the mechanism that speaks for the producers, is at the table. Right. And if you're not, don't complain.
Well, and that's, I think you're, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing too. Like, I think that analogy is great in regards to, maybe it is an idea that the stock growers could, whatever it is, whatever the policy is. But like you said, if you're not at the table, then they're just gonna, they're just gonna run with it because you're not there speaking up.
And I think it's not all on the defensive.
Right. Yeah.
So you need to advocate for yourself.
Yep.
And that's a big part of it. So you need to be out there and you need to say, this is good. This is why. When we get down to the Wyoming legislature, and our exec is top notch, Wyoming stock growers are very respected in the Wyoming legislature, and the legislators often look up the Wyoming stock growers and say, "What do you think about this?" Before legislation is ever introduced, what do you think about this? and we have input way before it's voted on.
Right.
We've had instances where they would say, we take stuff and try to get it passed.
Yeah.
And they'll say, oh, good idea. Right. You write the bill, and then we'll discuss it.
Right.
And so we have that
respect
at the legislature, and we have the connections with the legislators that they have confidence in what we say.
Right. Knowing
that we're representing the ag industry.
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
so
and
that helps.
And, the first thing we were talking about is kind of like how does the association come to a policy decision? And I mean, it's not like we said, it's not just the leadership guys getting together and saying, hey, this, it comes from the members, and it comes from the regional, and then, the convention meetings, and then the officers are like, okay, this is where, so yeah. It's not like you're just, the boards are just sitting there and like, this is what we're going to do. So I think that speaks to the respect too, is like, look, it is the real voice of, the ranching community or the ag community. So, and there are certain issues that are discussed a lot. I mean, it's not necessarily 100% agreed upon, but it's talked over, it's voted on, and it's yeah, what we feel is best. Right. Well, and that's always the best. Discussion is always helpful. Yes, conversations are, because like you said, there's probably multiple topics that probably get brought up every year that always have to be discussed, I would imagine, at the conventions and things like that. So it's interesting that the Stock Growers puts out a quarterly magazine. Okay. And it's really interesting to go back and look at those 50 years ago. We're talking the same stuff on a lot of stuff. Sometimes it just never goes away. Right. But you can't ignore it. Yeah. Well, and let's talk about the branding, because I think some people may not realize that that's an issue for livestock, especially I'm assuming that the branding stuff is a wrestling thing. If someone's stealing livestock, is that why that's still kind of an issue today? How do brand inspectors stop somebody or dive into that? Because that was one I saw right off the bat, and I was like, oh man, we're in 2021. You'd think we'd have some way of eliminating that, but branding in Wyoming. Legal proof of ownership is a brand. Mm-hmm. A brand on a cow is your ownership. You own a brand. It is registered with the state of Wyoming for that location on a critter. And so if you put that brand on the right location, then that's your cow. Right. Unless you don't own that cow when you brand her. Mm-hmm. That's called rustling. Yes. and so, I mean, and we have brand inspectors that by law, if you change ownership, if I sell a cow to you, then I have to have a brand inspection that says I sell this cow to Aaron. Gotcha. And you will have a piece of paper that proves that. So if you have a cow with my brand, and they say, wait a minute, that's not your cow, and you say, oh, I have this piece of paper, a brand inspection that says so. Okay. So on a bigger scale, when we sell our cattle to a buyer, right, then the brand inspector has to be here before they're loaded on a truck to be moved across the state line. Yep, and verified. Actually, to go across the county line, you have to have an inspection. Right, okay. So that's what that's about. But just recently, there was a challenge that law enforcement did not have the right to stop somebody to check brand inspections, to see if they're transporting cattle or horses. Horses fall into that too, and sheep. Yeah. He challenged whether that was legal for them to stop someone without cause. And he lost. Right. But it's being appealed, I think, again. He lost in the first appeal. But that was a challenge that it's like, yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so that's what that. So, and see, I think right there, I think we're all on the same page. I think that's, like you said, he lost that first appeal. So, well, interesting. So I didn't know that was, well, and that speaks why it's an issue. So you've got somebody that's not really understanding that process, and then some other people probably don't understand the process. I think he did understand it. He got caught with some horses without a brand inspection. Gotcha. That's when he chose to challenge it. Yep. And he lost the first one. So let's talk. We were talking about this too, and maybe you can explain this too, since you guys are out here. In August, we had Representative Cyrus Western on, and we talked about this a little bit about corner hopping and kind of the issue some people may have, especially like with state land or say some BLM land that could be landlocked or something like that, or like somebody's traversing across and they can't really get, they have to corner hop if anyone's following that geometry. Talk a little bit about what's maybe not your stance, but just, what are possible solutions to that issue of like corner hopping and hunting, and just really just access in general? It doesn't have to be hunting.
Access is tough.
Yep.
I mean, it's a touchy subject. Mm-hmm. Some people are, almost everybody is passionate one way or another. I mean, you have private property rights, you have public land, and people view them differently.
Right.
And when you have the corner hopping thing, is people who can't access public land without actually going over a corner of
private property.
Mm-hmm. And therein lies the big issue. Yep. And it's all about trespass and how do you handle it and what do you do with it? Yep. And it's touchy. Yeah. But private property rights are one of the most important rights of any landowner, and it not just ranchers. If you own a house in town, I don't think you want somebody just crossing through your backyard because it's closer to go to the neighbors. Yep. That's your property. Yep. And maybe ranchers have bigger backyards, but it's private property. Mm-hmm. And I think it needs to be treated as private property, and people need to look at it that way. Yes. And not that, okay, that rancher has several thousand acres, it shouldn't matter. The size doesn't matter. Correct. I don't care if it's 1 acre or 10 acres or 10,000 acres. Yep. It's private property. You own it, and you should be able to control that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a problem that's a way people don't look at it that way. Yeah. I think in their mind it's different because you have more. Yeah. Well, it's not different. Yeah. If you had 3 houses, it's still every one of them has a backyard, and it's your house. Mm-hmm. So. Yep. Well, and Cyrus brought that up, and then it's people always use the it's state land. I have a right to that state land, and it's like, well, I understand that, but we've got a private we got private property there that we have to respect. So anyway, so we were talking about, we haven't seen what that proposed bill was, but I wanted your thoughts on the corner hopping thing. And another thing Cyrus had mentioned was fences, because as being a 4th generation, the fences usually they're probably not 100% on the line most of the time, and then that's another issue that can be brought up when if someone's corner hopping or whatever, the fence could be one way or the other. And Cyrus had mentioned, like, if we're going to try and address this issue, there's going to be money involved, because you're going to have to probably put up fence, and the fence are going to have to be. So anyways, I wanted your thoughts on that too, because I mean there's a cost to anything we try and do, to quote unquote fix the issue. Yeah. Well, and the fencing deal. Okay, so there are a lot of state parcels that aren't accessible. Right. They're landlocked. Mm-hmm. Need the land. And a lot of the state parcels aren't fenced separately. I have a lot of state parcels that aren't fenced separately. Right. But they're way out here. I mean, there's a whole bunch of private land between them and anything. Mm-hmm. And they're not marked by a fence. Right. They're just, I kind of know where they're at. Yep. But I couldn't tell you to the inch because they're not fenced. Yeah. And another thing, out here in range country, most fences are really not online in a lot of places. Exactly. A lot of it was for convenience, for maintenance, rather than put a fence up and down a steep draw. They may go crossways here, and you'll have 10 acres in me and 20 acres over here, but in the end, it comes out pretty close. Yeah. The old timers were pretty sharp. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But it's not uncommon for fences not to be totally online. Right. And I think that's what Cyrus was mentioning is like, look, like
if whatever we propose to fix this problem, like if that's what we, and who knows what his proposal was, but I think some people had proposed like fencing off these state sections, which you're like, okay, I mean,
who's going to pay for that?
Yeah, you're not going to go out there like,
right?
Because and then one, it's hurting your rangeland because now you've got these parcels all going through these. So anyway, so that was his. So we'll see kind of what he proposed, but that's something that you guys obviously have. Been discussing. I saw that was kind of in your guys' thing in there, but.
Yep.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of.
Well, back to the fencing before we leave that.
Yeah.
And people need to realize it's easy to suggest fencing. That is expensive.
Yes.
When you start building a new fence, that's a huge expense for whoever. Whoever's going to build it is going to.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen by itself.
Well, and like you were talking about, there's some terrain issues you got to,
Topography is critical in a lot of places.
Yep. Yeah. Just because the line is straight there doesn't mean the terrain's going to be nice and flat there either.
In fact, if you're putting it online, it probably isn't in a very good spot.
Yeah. That's right. I want to talk a little bit about some. How do I put this in a way that doesn't offend anybody? But like, I was seeing in there that you guys are also at the table in regards to some national, like BLM and like kind of, I don't want to say the endangered species, but you guys do kind of help in regards to like how that would affect livestock and ranchers too.
Oh yeah.
So kind of speak a little bit about that, because I know that's, it was one of those things. Part of your analogy about if we're not at the table,
yep.
They're just going to run things through. And I think that comes from the federal level more so, and especially like the endangered species, like when they just run, me being in oil and gas, the big one's always sage grouse to me. Yep. Like, I'm just like, well, did you guys talk to, the Stock Growers Association? Because that affects them too when it comes down to stuff like that. So maybe speak on kind of if there's something that comes to your mind there.
Oh, yeah. So Stock Growers has been very involved with the wolves, the grizzly bears, and the sage grouse, mm-hmm. as well as the mountain plover in southeastern Wyoming.
Okay.
But several. But Wyoming Stock Growers was one of the leaders in the CCCAs, the Conservation with Assurances. I can't remember it's an acronym, but
okay.
That's the reason that they didn't get listed as an endangered species.
Okay.
The Wyoming Stock Growers was instrumental in that. They convinced the federal agencies, BLM in particular, mm-hmm. that let us do it this way, and they designated a bunch of habitat and had landowners agree with these agreements on what they would do grazing-wise on their BLM allotments and private property, and they got the feds to back off.
Right.
And that's why they're not listed.
Yeah.
In a large part thanks to the Wyoming Stock Growers. They were a leader in that because they were headed for listing.
Right.
And that was going to have a huge effect not only on oil and gas but on livestock industry.
Yep. Well, and if anyone just heard Dave there, like had the feds back off, like that just made me all like made me feel warm and fuzzy right there. Like
and they were involved in the whole deal. That we actually worked with them, not against them.
Right.
And said, okay, here's what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. Another thing, going back, the Wyoming Stock Growers is very active in the Public Lands Council.
Oh, right.
The Public Lands Council, actually a past president of the Wyoming Stock Growers and a Wyoming native from Rawlins is the president of the Public Lands Council right now.
Okay.
And Niels Hansen.
Yeah.
He was instrumental in the sage grouse deal.
Gotcha.
And he runs on a lot of the BLM stuff, and it was really close to home. He understood what he was talking about, which is crucial when you're talking that kind of stuff, because a lot of the feds, when they're talking, is talking more off the cuff and not logically.
Yep.
And not realistically.
Yeah. Well, and you've got people that are like, what the plan that got implemented was, let's try these regions, because we know this region.
Yep.
And if it doesn't work, that was probably part of the agreement, I imagine, is if this doesn't work, then we'll do it your way. But That's wonderful. Yeah, that's. I think a lot of people probably don't know that. Is that that's something that you guys can work, and we should say it that way. Work with the feds on those issues.
We do. Actually, last week I was on a conference call with Regional Forest Service and all of the supervisors from all of the forests in Wyoming. And,
gotcha.
And the stock growers, and along with the wool growers, we meet with them every twice a year.
Yep, twice at the conventions and.
Yep. And usually we do it down in Cheyenne during the legislative session, which wasn't there this year, so we just did it virtually.
Yeah, virtually.
But we do, and it wasn't about a specific. There was no problems. We were just talking forward-looking.
Yep.
And are there problems that we need to be looking at?
Right.
But back to the endangered species, the Wyoming Stock Growers has been very involved also with the wolf and the grizzly bear recovery.
Yeah.
And have signed on to several court cases. Friend of the court, amicus briefs.
Okay.
And so we do. Our goal is not to get too involved in litigation. But when we see that the need arises, we are also involved in some litigation.
Sure, and I think that's something that let's expand on the wolves and the grizzly bears a little bit, because those are, I think the wolves thing is, I think everyone's on the same page there. I think we've got it to where we want it to be, I guess.
Well, unfortunately, not everybody's on the same page. But,
right.
But we're where we want to be right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think the fight's over.
Right. Now, grizzly bears, because that's popping up a little bit more and more. What's kind of the moving forward step that you see from the stock growers for, the grizzly bear population? Just because, I don't know, and maybe it's just the media across the state, I just see more and more about grizzly bears. And maybe, I don't know, maybe they're just pushing stories, but.
Grizzly bears are a warm, fuzzy thing to a lot of people, but they kill a lot of cattle. And in reality, they're recovered. If you really would be honest with yourself, no one could argue that they're not recovered. Mm-hmm. And so they do need to be delisted. We were involved in a court case, and I'll be honest, I'm not up on it as much as I should be, but they did back off over on the Green River Cattle Association over in the Bridger Tetons.
Okay.
And they're allowing for a little more. They don't just have to sit and watch them kill a cow now.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure where it sits, but
right.
But they need to be delisted completely.
Well, and that was kind of the whole thing with the wolves too, was it not? I mean, there was a point where, and this is probably maybe where the association came in, is like, look, like you just said, they're not. You can't say they're not recovered, and it's not like you're, and again, that's where you're coming to the table and say, hey, we can come to a solution where we can protect our livestock, but protect the population of wolves. Would you say that's fair in regards? Yeah. Yeah,
and that's where the trophy game area and the kill on site came from.
Right.
They set those boundaries so that they could be confident that they would always have a certain number of breeding pairs in the Yellowstone ecosystem over there. But when they get to here, they're free game.
Yeah.
It's like a coyote.
Right. Man, see, I'm learning so much, because like when I was going through your little cheat sheet there, I was like, man, you guys do so much stuff. Talk a little bit about, because you said, the association doesn't want to do too much on the litigation side, but that is something that's in there in regards to that you guys will, if it's a need to do that. Talk, if someone's like litigation, what's that mean? You kind of talked about the amicus briefs, how does that come about? Is that part of the leadership, or does that come up at the conventions where that's voted on of like, we need to take action? That's
the leadership, mostly.
Okay.
Actually, at our last convention, there was a certain subject came up, and we did bring it up to the membership because the timing was right, and we told them what the case was, what was going on. It threatened private landowner issues, and they voted, yes, this is what we want to do.
Okay.
But typically, we don't bring suits initially.
Right.
We join into lawsuits to support that that view,
whatever that,
viewpoint.
Yeah.
But we're not the ones that are going out and suing people.
Sure.
But we don't shy away from that if it's something that affects our producers in Wyoming, then
then you guys will.
Then we will.
Yep.
If it's got merit.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's still, maybe that's more of a leadership, but it's still, like you just said, it can come from membership and kind of come from those. And
yeah, well, and a lot of it's still, you go right back to our policies. And everything we do is supported by policy.
Yeah.
So it's not like we just say, oh, we need to do that. It will be in our policies.
Right.
And so we're just taking that and supporting our where we stand.
Your guys' mission. Yeah. Well, is there any issue that actually, no, this leads right into it. So in June, right? Okay, I always get this right. In June, you'll be the acting president.
The very last day of the convention in June is when I will
take the reins. What is your what is kind of your vision of your leadership? Like, do you have anything in mind that that you'd really like to try and accomplish? I mean, not like move mountains and like get something done, but is there something that is a goal of yours once you're president of the association?
Survive. No. our big deal while in my term, the Wyoming Stock Growers will be celebrating their 150th anniversary, which we'll do that in June of 2022.
Yep. And
that will be down in Cheyenne. That's where the Stock Growers actually were formed, is in Cheyenne.
Okay.
And so we'll have it down there.
Gotcha.
And that's going to be a big deal.
Okay.
A big celebration.
Absolutely.
And reason to be that. I think we're the oldest organization in Wyoming. It was before statehood.
Yeah. Yeah. 1872. So yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so and that's where a lot of the respect comes from.
Right.
Something doesn't last that long and not have some clout.
Yes.
Some reason for being,
right,
so to speak.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, you got the 150th in 2022. I think something that, and you can touch on this a little bit. I think the first time you and I met with you and Terry we were talking about membership. So if you want to talk about that a little bit, and I think a question to lead up to that, Dave, is if you were given advice to maybe somebody, say like Nate, but maybe somebody that doesn't come from a ranching family and they somehow, that's what they want to do, is they want to raise livestock. What would be your advice? And then in regards to what would be your advice in joining the Wyoming Stock Growers too? Well,
so the Stock Growers, we have different kinds of membership. It can be an associate member, somebody that just a business who wants to support the organization. And when we have regular membership, which would be for producers.
Okay.
And that's based on the number of livestock, so it's a floating.
Yep.
A floating
number there. Number. Okay. And
so the more you have, the more you pay.
Right.
But nobody comes out and counts your cows. It's
honor system.
Honor system, and the thing about what I would say to anybody that wants to be a member who owns livestock is you're getting all of the perks for free if you're not a member, which is kind of sad because you're taking advantage of an organization that's doing it for you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are a member, then you have the right to have input and your voice is heard.
Right.
And it is definitely heard in the Stock Growers. There's different ways to participate. If you want to go to their meetings, to their conventions, and actually participate, everybody's welcome.
Mm-hmm.
If you prefer, and there's people who prefer not to do that.
Right.
But they could still be a member, send their dues, because it doesn't run for free, and at least support it for the things that they do.
Right.
The officers are not paid, and their travel is all on them. The Stock Growers does not pay for any of our travel.
Gotcha.
Even, if we were to ask, yes, they would buy plane tickets and stuff, but that's we can't afford it.
Yeah, yeah.
We're pretty efficient.
Yeah,
we're pretty efficient. We have 3 staff members that are paid, our exec, and then 2 gals in the office. But I just say it's a shame if you know about the Stock Growers and you don't pay your membership.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know about them, now you do.
Yep.
Thanks to Aaron. And
hopefully.
And you should be a member because they work for the producer.
Yeah.
And like I say, those who don't, they still, we don't say, well, this doesn't affect you because you're not a member. It still affects them.
Right.
As a matter of fact, on a fairly regular basis, there are people who call our stock growers office for assistance on an issue who aren't members.
Right.
And that's never a question that's asked when somebody calls is, are you a member? The issue is still addressed, always is, no matter whether they're a member or not.
Awesome.
And that's just how we do business.
Yep. And I would say that's probably very few organizations that run that way. What would, and I mean, just listen through everything we've talked about. I mean, you guys cover all ranges of issues that any producer would run into in Wyoming. So, I mean, there's like you said, if you're a producer and you know about it, like, I guess, kind of almost a shame on you.
Right,
And then,
right. Yeah. Who am I to judge, though?
and then, that is good to know that if you're just a business, not necessarily a producer, you can still support the association.
Yeah.
What would be your message, though, to somebody, this is the first time they've learned about the association, they're looking at becoming a producer. What's your advice, not necessarily joining the association, but what's your advice if they're stepping out and taking that risk to enter that lifestyle? That
is a scary thing for a young person to think about. The stock growers have what they call the YPA. It's the Young Producers Assembly, and it's people that are 40 and under, and it's getting pretty large.
Okay, which
is a good thing because they used to say, well, we're not going to go to the meetings because that's just all the old gray-haired people, and we're starting to get an influx of some younger producers, which is really encouraging because that's what you got to have. I don't care whether it's a stock growers or any other organization. If you don't have youth coming in, pretty quick they're all going to get old and die.
Yep, right, exactly.
And so, but for that young producer, if they had questions on where to turn, where to go, we have some things, and those other young producers would be great sources to visit with because we've got some young producers that have stepped out there and kind of did it in a pretty scary way, and they're getting it done. Yeah, and that would be a great source. Awesome for them to tap into. Yeah, I think Becky Podio out of Newcastle said she's probably a member of that. She was former Miss Wyoming out of Newcastle. Oh, I think you're right. I think Nathan talked about her. Maybe. Yeah. But okay, cool. So the Young Producers Assembly, and that's part of the association. Let me see here. Anything else you want to discuss as related to stock growers? Because then we'll kind of dig into personal producing type stuff, not necessarily stock growers, but just membership is tough. They're egg people aren't ones to go out and solicit stuff, and I'm the world's worst. and membership is tough. It's an issue. We struggle with it. Well, I think probably every organization does. Right. We have started a campaign to where we're hoping to get enough money raised to where we can hire a marketing person. Gotcha. To help us with membership. Yeah. But we struggle. Right. We struggle with that. So sign up if you're a young producer or any producer in Wyoming. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. Awesome. You could always use your help. Yeah. And I do want to hit on one thing before we kind of dig into some other stuff, Dave, is like, it sounds like the leadership side, right? Because you talked about being a regional and then like committees, like you don't necessarily have to call, the president, Dave Kane, when end of June comes around, to have your answer, any questions or any issues. Like there's probably regional members, there's committee members, most likely near you, wherever you are in the state, that you can ask before you, work up the tree. Yeah, and if you have an issue and you don't know who to call, you can call me, but call the stock growers office. Yep. And somebody will answer the phone.
Yeah.
And you will get an answer.
Awesome.
This isn't some secret society. We're there to help our members.
Right. Like you said, you probably more than half of the calls are probably people that aren't members. So.
Yeah, I don't know about half, but it's surprising.
Yeah.
Because you would think that, well, I'm a member, I'll call. Mm-hmm. But people know about the stock growers and just call because they had an issue.
Yep.
And even though they weren't a member.
Which is good, but then.
Well, they know that it will get addressed.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a feather in our cap that people trust it to happen.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's great. Okay, I want to change gears just a tad. This one might not be, but you are also on some national committees as well, outside of being a part of the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. So the national, hopefully I get this right, National Kettleman Beef Association. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that, or is that in conjunction with being a part of the association?
That's in conjunction with being part of
Okay.
We're an affiliate of the NCBA, I'll call it.
Okay.
And as part of leadership, then I am more involved with NCBA in their goings on.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Is that so that's probably the national stuff, anytime that there's some federal things and things like that?
Yep.
Okay.
They do all their stuff out of Washington, D.C.
Gotcha.
And they have the ears of they've got a really good lobby.
Good.
Group there.
Awesome. Okay, so that's part of the leadership part of the Stock Growers Association. Okay, so that's good. So as a producer, I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit about, I think some people, even though they may be from here, from Wyoming, you're surrounded by a lot of livestock producers, but talk a little bit about some programs like the Never 3, GAP, some other things that producers can be a part of that help sell your product and kind of help explain to any consumer about, look, we don't put antibiotics in our cattle. We don't give them hormones. We don't do these things, which I think might surprise a lot of people that it actually happens here in Wyoming. Because I think some people just are either they just don't know or they just don't want to know. So kind of talk a little bit about that. And if you want to, I know sometimes it's, it is personal. This is your guys' business, but maybe talk a little bit about those programs that somebody could be a part of.
Sure. We don't keep that many secrets.
Okay.
But it has been working well for us. So what we do, and I don't want to start another. So most people have heard of COOL, Country of Origin Labeling.
Okay.
And there's a lot of discussion whether that's good or bad. The World Trade Organization deemed it not fair to the other countries, so they took it away.
Okay.
And there's voluntary COOL and mandatory COOL. And I only mention that because country of origin labeling is telling the consumer what they're buying.
Right.
Okay, so what we do is we are doing that in a different way.
Gotcha.
So when before our calves leave the ranch, we put called an agent source tag. It's an ID tag in their ear that is unique to that animal. And it is actually recorded in a database that is actually in the USDA.
Okay.
They have it there.
Gotcha.
And then with that number in that animal's ear, we enter that animal in programs. And we certify that they are free of antibiotics, free of hormones, and we have auditors that come and
double check.
So, now with that being said, if we have a sick animal and we use antibiotics, we identify that animal. They're out of that program.
Gotcha.
So that doesn't mean we can't use antibiotics, but we use them responsibly, and we document which ones have that so that they're not sold as being antibiotic free.
Gotcha.
And the same way, hormones, we just don't use hormones, so that's easy.
Yeah.
They're all hormone free.
Mm-hmm.
And then a third thing that we add to our, there's BQA, Beef Quality Assurance, and that is a program that you go through and you certify that you know how to give a shot, where to give a shot in an animal, and how to handle an animal, and those sort of things. Mm-hmm. And so ours are all, we've all been through the BQA training, so that's part of it too. But then the other thing that we do is it's GAP, and that's Global Animal Partnership. And what they send an auditor out, and they ask a lot of questions. It's more on the animal welfare side.
Okay.
Do you provide shelter? Do you provide water? How do you handle them? They go out and look at our handling equipment.
Sure.
And they keep track. We also, on all of our audits, we keep track of our feed labels. So whenever we buy feed, whether it be mineral or a grain product or whatever, we keep those labels and we have them on file for them to look and see what is in that feed.
Okay.
And so that's all part of that audit.
Gotcha.
And so we can verify everything that those animals have ever been exposed to, everything they've ever ingested. And when we sell them, they're sold with that certification so that that person that buys those, if they want to know, they can follow that back, that number, that tag that was in that animal's ear, they can follow, that comes back to here.
All the way to you guys.
Here.
Wow.
And so, but when we do that, when we sell them, we sell them to another producer who would fatten them. And so he has to be certified. His operation has to be certified also.
Right.
That he's not using antibiotics and so on.
Hormones and all those, yep.
But through the paperwork, they can be traced. They can be followed back to the source.
Gotcha.
And so when I started this conversation, I talked about age and source. Mm-hmm. Okay, the source is the ranch. The age, back in the day especially, Japan wouldn't take anything that was over 20 months of age. They were worried about mad cow disease.
Right, okay.
Well, this also talks about age. So we can verify age and source.
Gotcha.
To the consumer. And then you have all of these different
other certifications.
Add-ons, other certifications that let a good portion of our meat goes to Whole Foods.
Okay.
And those people, it's important to them to know
where it comes from. Yeah.
And they're willing to pay extra for that knowledge.
Absolutely.
And if people are willing to pay for it, then I'm willing to go ahead and provide it to them. Mm-hmm. And that's how we market ours.
Yeah.
A lot of people, it doesn't fit their operation or they don't want to be told what to do or whatever. But for us, it didn't really change our operation.
Yeah.
Because that's what we were doing anyway. We're just letting people know that's what we do.
Right.
And they're paying the extra premium to know.
Awesome.
So that's what we do. So that's how I handle COOL, country of origin labeling. We're doing it personally.
Yeah.
And you can. There's different businesses out that actually do that.
Gotcha.
And they have to be approved by the USDA.
Okay.
Because it's not just somebody has an idea and say, I'm going to say these are good. It's actually monitored by the USDA.
Yeah, right. Because you were talking about that's how they're tracking it, which makes sense. Someone's got to be making sure they're
right. It's not just a I said, she said kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah. Does the I'm curious, does the stock growers help anybody with those questions if they want to try and enter those things, or would that be more of like a kind of like a 4-H or just through the USDA? I'm just curious.
It's a marketing thing.
Okay.
But it's not anything that the stock growers has pushed because of our membership markets in so many different ways.
Sure.
And so we don't really push a specific marketing plan.
And I get that, yeah.
But at our conventions, we have a lot of really great speakers on marketing would be one of them, and a lot of other topics, educational topics.
Yep. And I think
this would be a good one to be discussed.
Yep. Sure. And that's I was gonna my lead up question to that for like members, because no one can just show up to the convention, or can anyone show up to those conventions?
You have to register.
Okay. At least okay. Because I'm just thinking, this is where it's like, if you're not a member, you're missing out on some of this info and the education.
Very much so. And the other thing about our conventions too is we have quite a trade show. It's a pretty good trade show.
Right.
There's a lot of people come and show their stuff.
All the equipment and all that stuff.
Yep. Vaccine companies, equipment. There's a gal that brings jewelry every year that has quite a following.
Wow.
The big turquoise stuff and whatnot.
Awesome. I see you don't get any of that.
But Terry does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I buy birthday gifts.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm trying to. Do you have anything else you want to add, Dave? Or this is your. I think we went through all my questions. I'll be real honest with you. The only thing I would say is, just reminder that the summer convention will be here in Sheridan.
Yep.
June 2nd through the 6th? 4th. Second through the 4th. Mm-hmm. And then that'll be the summer convention. There's always a winter convention. And then 2022 will be a big year because then it'll be the 150th, and then that will be down in Cheyenne.
Yep.
And then, you guys are always looking for new members. And like you said, just if you're curious, if you're a young producer, they've got the Young Producers Assembly, or, just reach out to the Stock Growers itself. I do want to just kind of plug them too. So we mentioned the Wyoming Taxpayers Association was kind of a brainchild of the Stock Growers Association. Another thing that's also a wonderful group is the Wyoming Stock Growers Land Trust. Maybe just explain what they do differently than the stock growers. I know they're different, but just...
Well, the stock growers started that land trust 20 years ago.
So fairly new in retrospect to some other
I think
groups.
it's already the ninth largest in the nation as far as holding acres.
Acres, wow.
But it's conservation easements. They hold the easements. And... the stock growers set it up. It's different than a lot of the other conservation groups.
Yep.
In that it's conserving ag land, and it's all about ag land.
Gotcha.
And that's where its focus is, and that's what its specialty is. Mm-hmm. And
cool.
Yeah, it's really taken off.
Yeah, we were. I know Tate Smith, who's he might still be the intern director or whatever.
He's the interim director. Actually, he's not. They've filled the position.
Okay.
But he's still there.
Yep. Because he was talking about, him and I were talking about that you guys are working on kind of some of the property near Wolf Creek. And he said that was just, I could tell that he's very passionate about that. Yeah. It'll be really cool because that will be preserved agriculture land. And I think, so anyways, that'll be that might be him or the director, but I wanted to do that plug because that was also something that the Stock Growers has been a part of. Where I'm trying to think of kind of some last things. Just kind of for the listeners out there, if they've listened all the way through, Dave, what are your big or what do you know to be true because your family's been a part of it, but kind of re-emphasize the goal and the mission of the Stock Growers Association, and you know, why it's important to the state, I guess, and why it's important to producers. Well,
I think you just hit on something really important there. Agriculture is the one of the top 3 industries in the state, and year in and year out, ag is here. Mm-hmm. When the tourism industry fails a little bit, ag's still here. When the mining industry, energy industry took a hit, ag's still here. It's the rock. And to preserve that is critical. And I think something we didn't really touch on today, but something that is even more critical as far as I'm concerned, is succession in ranches and getting that ranch on. With land values the way they are right now, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it is really, really tough for someone to get started in ag unless they already have a big bank account.
Yep.
It's just, ag land is not selling for production value right now.
Right.
And so I think succession is very important, tough. Dealing with families is always tough.
Yep.
And I don't know. That's something that we have, through the Stock Growers has spent a lot of time on at some of their meetings, is having people there giving ideas on succession. Not everything works. Not one thing works for everybody.
Right.
Different things work different ways, but critically important.
Sure. Let's go on that for a little bit, actually, because one, families in itself are, dealing with families is, your family is difficult, but then add in top of it that it's a business as well. And then some of these, like you're fourth generation, that's, now luckily you've got, it's still passing on to, at least the legacy is going. But for people, that's probably what you're talking about, is the conventions have talked to families that, look, if there is no, a succession plan, right, then, like you said, then it's either you got to find some of these young producers that want to start it, or, and that's, like we just said, that's difficult in itself because it's a business and then family business. So what have you, is there something that at one of the conventions that you've heard from somebody that really stuck with you, or maybe you've seen it in your family because, you've got a legacy, fourth generation, so it's obviously working out. So maybe what's kind of something you've seen that stuck with you in regards to this topic of, and maybe it's, I'm trying to phrase my question better, but advice, I guess, on this topic that you've seen either from your family or that you've seen, someone say that you were like, that was a good point.
Communication. It is so easy not to talk about something. In fact, that's the easiest thing to do, not necessarily the best. You have to have those uncomfortable conversations before they become
a bigger issue,
a big blow up.
Yeah. And
that's tough because it's family. And if it's really uncomfortable, then you don't want to talk about it because it's family. Mm-hmm. And you have to deal, and you still work side by side that same day.
Yep.
And so it's tough, but you can't bury your head in the sand because it will not go away. I guarantee you, we're all going to die. And Uncle Sam's sitting there waiting with his hand out.
Yep.
And so how you do it, I think it's really important to involve a estate planner.
Yeah, a mediary of sorts. Yep.
Mm-hmm. To maybe an accountant to give advice. Mm-hmm. You can have the idea, but then just bounce it off of somebody.
Right.
Because maybe your good idea that you thought you had
isn't a good idea.
Work.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily a good idea.
Yeah.
But way better to find that out sooner rather than later.
Sure.
But I know it's communication.
Yeah.
And the older generation, okay, I'm getting closer to that now, doesn't like to communicate.
Well, and I think
it's you don't want to cause more angst.
Sure.
Than there already might be. Mm-hmm. Or even if there's not, then something's not being said.
Ooh, that was good too.
The younger generation wants to have, they think, they plan ahead. Mm-hmm. I would hope they would.
Right.
So they're thinking of the future.
Some of us, yeah.
So you got to talk. Maybe the answer is we're not going to do anything. Well, at least the younger generation needs to know that.
Yeah.
Or they need to know that, you know what? You're going to have to sell probably more than half the ranch to pay the taxes that are going to be due because I'm not doing anything. Mm. But those are things that don't go away by not talking about them.
Yeah.
And so it's critical. Not comfortable, but critical.
Right.
If in fact, and to me, legacy is important. That's what I'm about.
Awesome. No, I don't think I could have, that was a wonderful answer. Communication, and then I think you hit on, what you said was if it's all comfortable, something's not being said. Yeah. And then I think that's important too. And you mentioned that the stock growers have had people in and speakers. Is get someone, to bounce ideas off of. But I think that's also like, they're kind of the mediary too. Like you've got someone that's not family that can kind of ride the ships if there's, if you get serious enough about it, that would be what. But at least just involve your accountant. Say, if I do this, what happens? If this happens,
What are the consequences? Just start talking.
Yeah.
Not just with family, but somebody.
Right.
Because it's not going to just jump out and happen until that older generation makes the decision to do something.
Sure.
And the sooner you do it, the easier it is.
Yeah.
As far as getting things, if you want to start transferring stuff ahead of time, sooner
is better than later.
At least to start with.
Yep.
Have a plan. Maybe the plan is we're not going to do anything for 10 more years. Well, there's your plan. But don't just wait for 10 more years to see what happens, because you might die.
Yeah. Yeah, something could happen in 10 years. Yeah.
And then that legacy you wanted to pass on, it might not happen.
Right.
And that's sad.
Yeah.
If, in fact, nobody in the next generation is interested in it, and if that's what's going to happen, fine. But
you've had that conversation.
If that's what you want to happen, fair enough. But it would be a shame to not let it to not happen because you just were afraid to talk about it, because you didn't want to rile somebody's feathers.
Yeah. Right. No, that's. I think that's a great thing to end on, because that's, I think when I met with you and Terry the first time about this idea, about this show, that's one of the things is we don't have conversations, and we don't have this tough conversation of, you have to go have tough conversations in regards to secession. And so that was great. I think we'll end on that. Dave, I want to say thanks again for letting us come out here. We'll probably we'll get some video clips of the ranch, because I'll be honest with you, I don't think I ever came out here for the brandings or anything in high school.
I don't remember you.
Yeah. So.
But it's not too late.
Yeah, dang it. See, I told you guys I was going to leave the window open. Well, maybe we'll send. When's the last time we've had the high school kids out here? I don't know if we've sent the football team out here in a while.
Actually, we had the football team out here, not working. I had a bonfire for them.
Okay.
After the regular season, before the playoffs, when Nate was a senior.
Okay. That's been a while though. So
that was in 12.
So there's some
9 years ago.
Yeah. So there.
But we do get some high school kids come out and help us brand every spring.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, maybe we'll see if we can do the coaches and stuff again too, and come out here. But anyways, thanks for letting us out here, and we will have you on again for sure. I know if we can meet up. I know summer gets busy, but thanks again thanks for letting us come out here and talking the stock growers is great.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for coming out. I enjoyed this.
Thanks.